Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Online Sunday School. My name is Hannah Coolidge, and I'll be helping Margaret out for a couple weeks this summer with Sunday School. Last week, you guys were learning about Daniel and the writing on the wall, and this morning, we're going to be talking about the story of Esther. So Esther takes place after what you guys learned about last week. There's a different king comes on the scene, and he's the king of Persia. And so it's a little bit into his reign, and he decides to throw a really big banquet. So he invites all of the men from the town to come in to his banquet. And so they all come in to the palace, and they're eating all of this food and all the drinks and everything. And I don't think they had fishy crackers and apple juice, but they might have. I don't know. Anyways, so in the middle of this banquet, the king, he's like, I think I would like to ask my wife, Queen Vashti, to come out, and I'm just going to show her off, and I want all of these men to know who my queen is. And that wasn't something that you did back then. It wasn't a rule, but you just didn't do it. And so when the king asks Vashti to come, she refuses. And so because of that, he's like upset, and he's mad, he's frustrated, and so he asks his officials, who are like high up, they like advised him, they helped him out, and helped him make decisions, and they said, well, I think you should kick her out of the kingdom, because if all of the women in the kingdom find out what she did, then they won't want to listen to any of the men. And so that's what he does. He banishes Vashti, and he kicks her out of the kingdom. And so then a couple more days, weeks, maybe a couple months go by. The king's kind of lonely. He misses having a queen, and so he calls his advisors back in, and he says, what am I supposed to do? And they said, well, we've got to find you a new queen. So let's gather up all the young ladies in the community who are single, not married, and we'll bring them here, and we'll give them new clothes, and we'll pamper them, and do all this stuff, and then you can pick which one you like the best. So the king thinks to himself, he says, that's a good idea. So that's what he does. He invites all the young ladies to come to the palace so that he can pick one of them to be his new queen. Now, one of these young ladies, her name was Esther. And she's kind of really important part of the story. And Esther, her cousin's name was Mordecai. And Mordecai was the gatekeeper in the palace. And he would stand by the gate. He's kind of like a security guard, sort of. That'd be our modern day equivalent. He had raised her from a young age. Her parents had died, and he had raised her. And so she was single, not married. And so when the king summoned all the young ladies, she went along with them, and she went to the palace. And so all the young ladies get to the palace, and they spend a couple months, maybe even a year or two, being pampered, fed palace food. They're going to the salon, they're going to the spa, they're getting their hair done, they got all this perfume and good food and clothing and jewelry and everything, and finally the day comes when the king decides today's the day he's going to pick a queen. So he brings all the ladies before him, and one by one they come before him, and they line up, and one by one they come before him, and he, one by one, it's, nope, not her, next. Nope, not her, next. Nope, not her, not her. And finally, it comes down to Esther's turn, and she appears before the king, and he holds out his scepter, which is a sign that he's approved of her, and he's picked her to be his queen. And so the decree goes out across the land that Esther is the new queen, and she's given robes and a crown. Robes and a crown, and she's crowned queen. Now Mordecai hears about this, and he's very excited, and he sends word to his cousin, and he says, Esther, he says, you may not know why this is going on, you might not know what's happening, but there's a plan in this, and so, there's a reason for this, and God has a plan. And so life goes on a little bit, and the king, he's a busy guy. He's got a big kingdom, and he needs help running it, sort of. And so he decides that he's going to promote a man named Haman to be his second in command. So there's Haman. He's the second in command, and basically what that means is that he is the second most powerful man in the kingdom, which means, except for the king, Haman is like top. He's on top. He can make all the decisions. He has all the power. People have to do what he says. And so Haman is promoted king. Now, in the meantime, it's pretty usual that obviously the king, not everybody likes the king. And so one day, Mordecai's at work as the gatekeeper, and he overhears these two men plotting. It's just kind of a fancy word that means they were planning something. And here's them, they're whispering to each other, and they're saying, I don't like that king, and I think we should get rid of him. We should kill him. And so they're planning this out, and Mordecai hears this, and that's his job. His job is to watch out for the king and have the king's back. And so he's like, oh no. He's like, they're planning to kill the king, but you can't just appear before the king uninvited. You can't just show up. You have to be called. And so Mordecai, he says, Esther, when you get the chance, you need to tell the king that somebody's plotting to kill him. Someone's planning to kill him. And so the next time that the king calls Esther into the throne room, Esther informs him that these two men are trying to kill him. And so he has them arrested. And so Esther and Mordecai saved the king's life. And so in those days, it was pretty normal for them to write everything down. They wrote everything down, everything that happened in the life of a king, and they were called records, or kind of like a journal or a diary sort of. And so it was recorded that Esther and Mordecai had helped save the king's life. Now, Haman, he was second in command. He was very important, and he thought very highly of himself. He's very prideful, very arrogant, and one of the things that bothered him the most was anytime he went out in the town. So it was pretty normal for the second in command guy to go out in the town. He would go out on his horse and his chariot, and because he was second in command, everybody, when they saw Haman coming, were to bow down to him. It was kind of their way of showing respect and honor, showing that he was important. And so everybody, when they saw Haman coming, they would bow down before him, show him some respect. We've got some people bowing. But Mordecai, he didn't bow down to Haman, because he knew that you're only supposed to bow down to one person, and you're only supposed to worship one person, and that one person is God. And he knew Haman wasn't God, and so he refused, and this bothered Haman. It bugged him so much that he thought to himself, I gotta get rid of this Mordecai guy. And so he went before the king, and he said, King, there's this group of people, and they're called the Jews, and they don't respect you, they don't like you, they refuse to show you any respect, and they're dangerous people, and we got to get rid of them, we got to kill them all. And so the king thought to himself, he goes, can't have dangerous people around it, and I don't like it when people don't, honor me and respect me. So he issued the decree that on a specific day and a specific time, all the Jewish people would be taken and killed. Now, in those days, when a decree was issued, they put paper and posted things on trees like signs and windows nowadays, but it's a little different back then. And Mordecai heard of this, and he's like, I've got to tell Esther. And so he gets word to Esther, and he's like, Esther, you've got to talk to the king. You've got to get him to understand what is going on, and you've got to stop this. And Esther's like, Cousin Mordecai, I can't do that. To appear before the king without an invitation was something that could get you killed. And she's like, Mordecai, if I do this, the king could kill me. And he's like, Esther, you've got to. This might be the reason that you were made queen, is so that you could stop this. And so Esther goes, okay, Mordecai, but you got to do something for me first. I need you to go, and I need you to get all the Jewish people together, and I need you guys to fast. And that's just kind of a fancy word, or a biblical word, for meaning that they, instead of eating, they would pray about things. So instead of eating lunch, you would pray. And so Mordecai goes back and gets all the Jewish people together, and they all decide that they're going to fast for and then Esther will go before the king. So the day arrives when Esther would go before the king, and I'm sure she was nervous. I mean, there's no way she wasn't nervous. And so she gets on her queenly robes and her crown, and she enters into the room where the king sits on his throne. And the room kind of goes silent, and everybody's holding their breath because they're like, oh no, what's going to happen? Like, Queen Esther has showed up here in front of the king, and he didn't call for her. Like, what's going to happen? And so the king's sitting there, and he holds out his scepter to Esther. And we've seen that before, and basically what that means, boys and girls, is that means that he's telling her, it's okay, you can come make your request to me. And so Esther comes, and the king goes, Esther, you've done a very brave thing by coming here, and so what is it that you want? Like, it must be important to you, otherwise, you wouldn't have risked your life for it, so what is it? Now, I'm sure Esther was nervous, and she's like, well, king, she's like, I won't tell you here, but I'm going to make a banquet, and I want you and Haman to come to this banquet tonight, and then I'll tell you what I want. And so the king's like, free food? Yeah. So he's like, yes, Haman and I will come to this banquet. So Esther goes back to her quarters, and she prepares the banquet. You need a lot of food. You're going to need your table. You need a lot of food and drink. And she prepares the banquet, and the king comes and he eats it. And Haman and him, they enjoy it very much. And at the end, when it's all finished, they've eaten all the food, the king goes, now Esther, what is it that you want? I'll give you anything, up to half my kingdom, which is a lot of money and a lot of land. And she goes, well, king, she's like, I'm going to make another banquet tomorrow night, and then I'll tell you what I want. And so the king goes, all right. So the king goes back. It's time to go to bed. So the king goes back. And as Haman is leaving the palace, he comes across Mordecai, who is the gatekeeper. It's not uncommon. But Haman notices something about Mordecai. Mordecai is not afraid of him. He's not bowing to him. He's just standing and won't even look at him. And Haman's furious. He's like, the nerve of this guy. Like, I'm the one who's planning on wiping out him and his entire family, and he's not even afraid of me. So he goes home and he tells his wife all about it. He tells her about the banquet, and then he says, but this Mordecai, man, he really bugs me. And so his wife goes, well, why don't you go before the king and ask if you can kill him tonight, right here, right now. And Mordecai goes, that's a good idea. That's what I'll do. So Haman makes his way to the king. Now, what Haman doesn't know is that the king, he couldn't sleep that night. I don't know whether he had too much chocolate or too much sugar or, I don't know, too much coffee maybe, but he couldn't sleep. And so he asked that the records be read to him. And what that means is that you pull out this ginormous book, probably 2 feet thick for all we know, and it was full of all the records of everything the king had ever done. Every time he brushed his teeth, every time he slept, every time he had a banquet or went out to battle, everything. They just recorded everything. And so he was having the records read to him because some things were exciting as a king and other things were really, really boring, and it's a great way to fall asleep. And so gets to the part where Mordecai had saved his life, had told him about these two guys. Remember back in the earlier part of the story where Mordecai overhears these two guys plotting to kill the king, and he sends word to the king, and he and Esther save the king's life. And the king goes, oh, that's funny. I remember Mordecai. I remember him saving my life, but I don't ever remember thanking him. And so he asks him, and he goes, read through the records some more. Did we ever thank Mordecai? And they read through, and they're like, no, we didn't thank Mordecai. King goes, that's strange. I should come up with a way to thank him. And just then he gets word that Haman is in the outer room, and like your porch or something, and he's like, Haman wants to see you. And so he says, oh, Haman, he's a smart guy, he'll help me. He says, yes, bring him in. So Haman comes in, and the king says, Haman, I need your help. And Haman's like, oh, okay. And the king goes, there's this guy, and he saved my life, and he's done all these wonderful things, and I want to thank him, so what should I do to thank him? And Haman goes, must be talking about me. I'm a pretty great guy. I'm pretty important. He must be wanting to thank me. So what would I want? He thinks for a minute and he goes, I know. He says, well, king, for this man who's so wonderful and has done all these great things, I think that you should take him and give him one of your royal robes and put a crown on his head and get somebody to lead him through the streets on your horse and telling everybody in the street how wonderful and amazing this guy is and all that he's done for you. And the king goes, Haman, that's a really good idea. He says, Haman, I want you to take Mordecai. And I want you to put him on my horse, and I want you to put a robe on him and put a crown on his head. And I want you to lead him through the streets, telling everyone all about what he's done for me and how he saved my life. So that's what Mordecai does. He takes, or that's what Haman does. He takes Mordecai and he puts a royal robe on him and a crown, and he puts him on the king's horse, and he leads him through the streets of the kingdom, saying, hey everyone, this guy, the king really likes him, and he saved the king's life, and he's a great guy. Now, you can imagine that Haman was pretty upset. I mean, this is a guy that he doesn't like, and he's got to walk around town telling everybody how great he is. So Haman's upset and he's sad, but he's like, well, at least I've got this banquet to go to tonight. And so Haman gets back, and Mordecai goes back to watching the gate, and Haman goes back and he's like, well, I've got to go to this banquet. So he goes to the banquet with the king, and Esther's there. And finally King's like, all right, Esther, you've given me 2 banquets, and you've come before me, and he's like, you got to tell me, what is this all about? What do you want? I'll give it to you, anything, up to half my kingdom. And she says, well, King, there's this man, and he's plotting he's planning to kill me and my family, and I need your help. I need you to stop him. And he's like, who would do such a thing? Who would plan to kill my wife, my queen, and her family? And she goes, it's Haman. Haman has done this. And finally she's like, I'm a Jew, and Mordecai's a Jew, and therefore my family is the Jewish people. And Haman has got you to make this law that will kill them. And she goes, I need your help. You've got to stop it. And of course the king is furious. And so he says, he arrests Mordecai and he throws him in jail. And so he says, but Esther, I can't. The law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. The Bible tells us that the law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. And so the king's like, I can't change the law I made, but I will make a new law saying that the people can defend themselves, and that he will make a law that encourages other people to help them. And so when the day came for the Jewish people to be killed, nobody touched them because they were too afraid of the king and his laws. And so the Jewish people were happy, and they threw a festival, a banquet in the queen's honor, and the king took Mordecai and made him his second in command, and he took Haman's place. And so, boys and girls, that's the story of Esther. And so we get to the end of the story, and there's one thing that Mordecai said to Esther when she became queen, and it is for such a time as this. Like, you're made queen for some reason, and when Mordecai is telling Esther to go before the king, he says, perhaps you were crowned queen for such a time as this. And so I just wanted to talk to you, boys and girls, a little bit about how the story of Esther can be applied to our lives. You see, when Esther was crowned queen, she didn't know that Haman was going to plot to kill her family and to kill her people. She didn't know that. She didn't know that when she was crowned queen that these 2 guys were going to try to kill the king, and Mordecai would overhear and tell her, and she would let the king know. She didn't know all of this. She just was crowned queen, and she just knew that was what was going on. She didn't know what God was doing. And so, boys and girls, I want to encourage you that in our lives, when we don't know what's going on, we can trust God, because He does. He knows what's going on. He's in control, and He's got this whole thing planned out. And so I guess I'm thinking specifically of the coronavirus, this COVID-19. You probably have heard about it on the news, or maybe heard mom and dad talk about it, or heard about it from school. You can't go to school. You're not at school. Life has changed for you guys. You're probably at home a lot more, probably have to spend more time with your siblings than maybe you would like. You know, you probably have to share your toys with them because they're bored of their toys and your toys look better. I don't know. But I do know that life probably looks a lot different for you than it did a couple months ago. And so I want to encourage you that when life changes and when we look at life and we think, I don't know what God's doing, I don't know what's going on, we can find comfort and hope in the fact that we can know God. We can know God who's in control. Like, He's in control, and so we can know God even though we can't always see what He's doing. And so your memory verse for this week is Ezra 3, verse 11. And the middle part of it says, for He is good, for His steadfast love endures forever. And the He that it's talking about in that verse is God. So God is good, and God's steadfast love endures forever, which means God loves us now, and He will continue to love us forever. And so that can be comforting, right? Like, we don't know what's going on in the situation. Life's a little topsy-turvy. The whole world seems to be going crazy. But we can know that, first of all, God is good, and that His love endures forever. That He loves us no matter what. And He's got a plan, and He's in control. The Bible tells us that. And so I just want to encourage you with that this morning. And that's your lesson for this morning. And I hope you guys have a good week. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Probably not next week, but I look forward to seeing you again soon. So have a good morning.